I think I'm live. Okay, that's great. That is great. And I was promised that I could blur my screen, but apparently I can't. So, I mean, blur the background on my screen, but I don't know where I would do that. So, okay, let's get started. Um, First time I'm doing this, so anyone here, if anyone just wants to say something, like a chat, just say hi or something like that, that would be great, just so I know I'm not here by myself. Eh? What do you think? Anybody? Anybody? No? Uh, there we go. There we go. Okay. Okay. So we have 5 people here, which is nice. So feel free to say any questions. Now, I want you. Hello. Hey, Gianna. Hey, Gianna. Yeah, she's here. So I want you to. We're very loose with how this is put together, and so I want you to consider that I'm going to tell you what I think is important for the recruiting process. And you may be thinking, like, wait a second, Bruce, just tell me about how to do the resume, how to do the cover letter, like all this other stuff. But no, I want to tell you these things because I think it's important for you. And when I tell you these things, you're going to identify it's like, okay, maybe I understand now why I'm not getting any traction with my application. Okay. And it's because Bruce told me now I understand how the whole process works. And this is what I want to do. I want to tell you about the recruiting process. So let me see. I wrote some notes. I usually don't write notes, but I wrote notes this time. And so here we go. I'm not a note taker. As a matter of fact, I got through my last year at BCG with just writing down things once. I wrote down things once, and that was it. So that's pretty impressive for as busy as it was. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I wanted to talk a little bit about what consultants are. So we all know what consultants are. Consultants are the people that go in there and they're like, hey, I'm going to fix the problem. And they're going to hop in and then they're going to hop out. And that's what consultants are. But there's something a little bit deeper about consultants you need to understand. And this will make you understand the whole process a little bit better. Consultants always have to say something. It's in their DNA. And even I, as a recruiter, I was 15 years at BCG, but recruiting the entire time, even I was told, Bruce, you have to speak up in meetings. And I was thinking, why? Why do I have to speak up? I mean, we're talking about I'm full in a room full of partners. Why do I need to say anything? And they would tell me it's because if you're there and you're not saying anything, it's suspicious. Why are you there? And I kind of like that doesn't make any sense. I'm there for other reasons. But it kind of makes sense when you think about consultants in general, because consultants, they need to say something in their meetings because they have to justify their costs, right? Their existence. And so they always have to say something. And there's a couple examples of this. I have a friend who was an associate and she was inside of a room and she was told, say something. And she was thinking like, I'm an associate. I have nothing to say. There's a CFO, there's a CEO. Why would I say anything? I don't know what to say. But it was on her review. She has to say something. And so she said, finally one day the CEO was talking and she was like, he said something, blah, 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 blah. We should do this, this, and this. And she thought, okay, opportunity. Okay, excuse me. So what you're telling me is that we should do this, this, and this. And he said, exactly. That's exactly what we should do. And so all of a sudden it's just like, and then she was like, knocked it off her checklist. And she was able to, she said something, but it wasn't anything important. It was just her repeating back exactly what they said. But it was important for her to say something because she was justifying her existence. Same thing for someone else who was like told constantly, text throughout the email, a consultant, text by her project leader, say something. Halfway through, say something. Halfway through, say something. Every single day, say something until she finally started saying something. So this is very important. They always have to say something. It's in their DNA. And also they believe that they're smarter than everyone else. And now why do I say that? Is because they start out kind of like humble. And then as they're there a little bit longer, they start becoming Mr. Know-it-all. Like, I know how to break down a problem. And of course, everything is business related. I know how to break down a problem. I know how to do this, this, and this. And they get a little bit full of themselves. And now you'll see this by the way they structure things. It's not like I was there and I was just doing my own thing. I was a recruiter and I had a lot of experience, but I can just do my own thing. Above me was the recruiting manager, who was like, I don't want to even talk about her. But above her was a consultant. And that's the project leader, right? And then and the project leader is in charge. Like I was in charge of associates for a while, someone who's in charge of associates. And we have one who's in charge of consultants, and we have one who's in charge of advanced degrees, and one who's in charge of experience hires. And then above them is a recruiting partner, who is a regular partner, but this is what the role they've taken, recruiting partner stuff, right? So you always have to answer to a partner. So they don't let you do things on your own. You do them under their guidance. So consultants, because consultants are smarter than everyone else. Okay. So now that we know those two things, during the course of working with people, I probably had recruiting directors, like 10 recruiting directors who are in charge of looking over me. And only during that time did one of them say to me, because I kept on coming to him and saying, well, should I do this? Should I do that? And only once did one come to me and say, Bruce, just do what you think is best. Only once. The rest of the time, they all thought that they knew better than I did. Even when you're talking about I was there for 12 years or 13 years, they all thought they knew better than I did, even though they were only like 3 years into their role. So you're always going to run into this. Consultants always know more than anyone else. Okay, now we have a question right now. I had interviews with Bain now in a row on internships and graduation in a row in the London office, but not McKinsey BCG. Do you think referral will help BCG McKinsey in London office? Yes, referrals are very important, and we'll get to referrals, and I'll tell you why they're really important. Okay, so first we're going to go into the two recruiting processes. There's one for people who are in school, and there's one for people who are experienced hires. Experienced hires just means that you're out of school. Doesn't mean you have consulting experience. It just means you're out of school. So those are the two that we're going to be talking about. First, let's talk about people who are in school right now. First of all, there's a deadline. There's going to be a deadline, and the deadline is going to be, say, okay, so say it's like the 20th of this month. Is there any advantage to me applying 2 months before? No. As a matter of fact, if you apply too early, they may even think that you're not part of this resume drop because it's too early. So waiting until the resume drop, that's better to do. Okay. Now, you don't want to apply 2 days before because the system may be a little clogged. I have been there where it actually broke down because we're overloaded with candidates. But as far as applying a week before, yeah, you can do that. But 2 weeks before, it's probably not necessary. 3 weeks before, probably not necessary. And what you may be thinking is like, well, they'll see my application first. And if they see my application first, then maybe they'll interview me first. And then I'll get the job before anyone else. It doesn't work that way. And I want to compare this a little bit like if you're at a party and you're looking at people as they're coming through the door, and you see someone who's really good looking. You're like, hey, that's the person that I'm going to marry, and we're going to have babies, and we're going to like live our lives together, And then so that's what you do. But then immediately after them comes this really good looking person who like this makes the first person look really bad. And you're just like, I should have waited because that one, that's kind of shallow. That's all it means is about looks, right? But this is what consultants firms like to do. There's no reasons why they would want to look at you as the first candidate and say like, hey, this is as good as it's going to get. Let's interview this person. Instead, they wait until all candidates have applied. And so they're going to wait for that deadline. And they're going to wait a couple of days after the deadline because you have to do assessments. And so they're going to wait for the assessments to pass. And then they'll look at you. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to download a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet's going to have every single person who's applying on it. And what they're going to do is they're going to start comparing everyone to them and to each other. And how do they do that? Well, they look at GPAs. They look at test scores. You look at school, they look at where you want to apply, which office you're applying to. So they're going to be looking at all this stuff. And it's so easy to get sorted out during that time because they're comparing you. Now there's probably people who are in there who are Rhodes Scholars. I never seen consultants drool as much as when they saw a Rhodes Scholar. There's going to be some people who've just done really, really well in school. Those annoying people who've done really well. There's people who've gone to schools that are like very recognizable, and then there's your school that may not be as recognizable, right? So this is what you are doing right now. You're in competition with all these people. So this may be a very easy way of you getting cut out of the whole process. You know, if they have a GPA cutoff, they're going to hit that cutoff. If they need to move it up higher, they'll move it up higher. And so this is what they're going to be doing with this comparing everyone to each other. Now, one of the things that they will compare and look at, they have a category for, is previous interviews. If you interviewed before, they'll want to see what your interview scores were. Were you really off, or you were actually really close? Because that does make a difference. And they'll also have a category for referrals. So if you do have a referral, they will see that as well. Within this line that they've downloaded, they will see that you also have a referral. And that could make a big difference when you're applying to these firms. Okay. Hold on. Like I said, I don't usually take notes, but I did this time because I wanted to stay on. Okay. So now we're talking about comparing people. This is what they're doing. Comparing. And this even happened afterwards when you look at okay, so let me go to what's next. Okay, so you get invited to you get an invitation to interview, and then after that you are going to get well, first of all, sorry, stepping back. Now you have to fill out, well, before this, you would have had to fill out an application. You're probably wondering, like, well, why did I get rejected? Why did they not move me forward? Why do they care about SAT scores? Why do they care about GPAs? Why do they care about all this stuff? This stuff isn't necessary. Well, you're still in school. We're talking about people who are still in school. And it is kind of relevant, because what they're doing is they're looking for people who have a lot of energy. Because to them, energy, if you have brought the energy for several years, even like a third of your life at this point, that means you're going to start the job and you're going to continue to bring the energy, right? You're like the guarantee. Now, if all of a sudden you're just like, you're getting near graduation, all of a sudden you have a lot of energy, you should be thinking like, hey, look at me, I have so much energy. It's like, yeah, but everything before you says you don't have any energy. The school you went to, it's a really easy school to get into. The test scores, you did really poorly in your test scores. Your TPA is really terrible. You have not demonstrated that you have this very solid energy. You're not the guarantee. And I like to compare this to, like, say, if you knew someone who was a cheater. They like to sleep around, and every relationship they had, they ended up breaking up because they always cheated on the person that they were dating. They have a reputation. And so are you going to date that person? Probably not, because it's going to end up in a bad relationship. Now, at the same time, they could say, no, I've changed and I'm not longer going to be a cheater. It's just like, yeah, but what are the chances? Can people really change like that? So there's going to be a lot of you out there who are just like, hey, I haven't had a spectacular career, but now all of a sudden I'm ready and I'm going to do really well right now. And they're thinking it's going to be like, are you really going to take a risk? Especially when we have so many people to choose from. And that's the advantage that these places have. They can choose from a lot of different people. Okay, so there's that. All right, I got through that page. All right. So what happens is you move into the interviews. Now, once again, in the interviews, they're not going to be interviewing people. If you got an invite, you will now interview. Now, they're not going to be interviewing people one at a time, because that is, once again, you look really good when you're all by yourself. But when you put someone next to you, you don't look as good. So that's why they like to interview people in batches. So they may be interviewing you in that day, like 60 people that day, or 20 people, depending on the location. Now, and once again, they are comparing you, okay? Comparing you. Same thing, when we finally do decision rounds, we'll probably interview 10 people in the day. I was told, I brought in one person for decision round interviews once, and the recruiting partner said, Bruce, don't do that. Bring in at least 4. So they will bring in a batch at the very end for decision rounds. Now, in decision rounds, you have you are being interviewed by partners of the firm. Partners or principals, or whatever you want to call them, managing directors. People who are very high up in the firm. And so they're the decision makers. And these are the people who are going to be making the final decision on whether or not you get an offer. Now, keep in mind, what I said before in the very beginning. Consultants like to say something. They always have to say something, and they think they're the smartest person in the room, even if they're in a room full of a bunch of consultants. On that very last day, what we do is we would get everybody together, close the doors, put everyone's information on the board. We would put just SAT scores, we put GRE scores, we put ACT scores, we put GPA, we put their school, we put everything on the board. And trust me, the partners have to say something about everything. And if they see a low GPA there, they will bring it up. And who's going to defend you at that point? There's only one person in the room, and that's going to be me. At least one person who knows you as well as you could possibly be known by anyone at the firm, and that's going to be me. And if they say that GPA is low and I don't have an answer for them because I don't know why your GPA is low, then you're going to get rejected. And they're going to question, why did I even bring you forward in the first place? So when you look at your application, be very, very realistic when you look at your application and think to yourself, are there any concerns in my application? And then if there are concerns in your application, you should think about explaining them to somebody. Like if you have a referral, I mean, you could say like, hey, I got locked up, I have a referral. But if you have a referral and that referral is moving forward, eventually that referrer is going to have to talk to me because I'm going to see the application. If there's any deficiencies in the application, if your GPA is really low, I'm going to go to your referrer and say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to bring this person through because their GPA is really low. And your referrer is either going to say, yeah, Bruce, but you know why their GPA is low? It's because of this, this, and this. And I'll be like, oh, okay, that's reasonable because I can tell this to the partners. But if your GPA is really low and your referrer doesn't know that it's low, they're going to be blindsided and they're going to say like, oh, I had no idea. I feel really embarrassed now. Just feel free to reject them. And then your referral is not going to go anywhere. So being transparent with everybody, being realistic with yourself is really important. I can bring forward someone who has a low GPA, but only if I know the story behind it. If you were very first time this ever happened, we have a 3.6 cutoff at BCG, 3.6 undergrad GPA cutoff. I brought in my first 3.5 ever. And that was the first time I ever did it. And the reason why I felt comfortable doing it was because the person had spectacular test scores. They also had double major, economics and computer science, and these things don't overlap. And so, but sure enough, in that room at the end of the day, one of the partners pointed to it and they said, that GPA is low. And I said, yeah, but you know what? Double major, blah, 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 blah. And he said, oh, okay. And I was shocked because that was the first time it ever happened. And so as long as someone knows your story and as long as a reason for your deficiency is going to be explained away. But if you expect to just blindly go and apply and for people to somehow think like, well, he just had a tough time, they don't know. And so you have to tell them your story. It's really important. Okay. So once that, I had someone I was able to get through who had 3.2, but sure enough, partner, 3.2, that's really low. And it's like, thank you very much. I know it's low. But she went to Caltech and Caltech's a really tough school and she was majoring in chemical engineering. Chemical engineering is a really tough major. So if you're doing this stuff, but if I know and if I'm taking the time, then you're at an advantage. Okay, I'm going to answer a few questions at this point. So when we talked about the first question, had interviews with Bain 2 years ago, internship and graduate in a row in the London office, but not McKinsey or BCG. Do you think referral will help for BCG and McKinsey in the London office? I think it would be very helpful. Referrals, what they do is they take it to the next level, right? If you're an okay candidate, all of a sudden you're a good candidate if you have a referral, because they believe that no one knows the job better than anyone else than a consultant. So if you have that, then that's great. Now it may be the reason why you didn't receive interviews in the past is maybe because you didn't have referrals in the past. But having referrals at McKinsey and BCG would be very important. Now, McKinsey is kind of tricky because McKinsey will be very much flip-flopping as far as like, oh yeah, we don't redo referrals, and then they will be referring to other people at the same time. The thing you have to keep in mind is they are very much if they don't do referrals, it's probably because they don't like you. But if they do referrals, then they'll figure out a way to do it. So, but referrals will definitely help. Referrals, when I was talking about that big machine processing, and they have a line that says for referral, That is what stops the machine. All of a sudden they see that you have a referral. It's like, crap, referral. I have to look really closely at this person, because the referral, especially if it's in the office that I'm in, I have to go talk to that person who's referring you, and it's a consultant, and and that consultant does things for me. They do marketing for me, they do interviews for me, they do all this stuff for me. So I have to be very nice to them, and I have to look really closely. I have to read cover letters, I have to read resumes, I have to do all this stuff, and I have to make a very informed decision to them. Okay, have a very informed conversation. Now, at the same time, like I said, if your referrer isn't aware of any problems that you have on your resume, you could very easily still be disregarded. So you want to let them know this stuff. If you had 30 minutes talking to someone and they were going to refer you, I wouldn't spend 30 minutes talking about your low GPA. But what I would spend 30 minutes doing is, well, I'd probably talk about 2 minutes about your low GPA and the reason why, and then talk about the other 28 minutes about all the great things you've done, and also talking about them as well, because they like to be talked about. Reasons for having low GPAs: they will not mess with the following 4 things. They won't mess with family. They won't mess with religion. They won't mess with financial problems, and they won't mess with health. So if those are any of the reasons why, if you were supporting your family, if you were sick during a certain period of time, sometimes when it comes to going to school, I wanted to go to a Catholic school. That's the reason why you went to that school. As opposed to another school, or of course there's health, so you have a reason for this. So there's legitimate reasons behind it. And if they say, honestly, if you're supporting your family and you're financially, taking 3 jobs at the same time, and if they say, who cares, and that's just like a lame excuse, then do you really want to work there? It's full of a bunch of bastards, right? Okay, a better life. I have a question. I was approached by a recruiter, sent her regarding a manager position on LinkedIn to send my resume, and she wants to call me now. I apologize, I sent my CV 3 hours, and she never replied. Okay, so this is really sad, and it's really sad because this is one of the things that's in a recruiter's toolkit. You hear about consultant toolkit, and you're like, they can do this, 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 and this. Within the recruiter toolkit is don't respond. And a lot of times, do not respond to a person means it's because they just don't know. During the pandemic, I was asked to not respond to our interns who we actually had given offers to, and they knew they were going to start with us. I was told not to respond to them because we just didn't know what we were going to do with them. We didn't know what we were going to do. Could we bring them in? Could we bring them into the office? Weekly. We were always thinking weekly that everything was going to get better. And so one of the things in their toolkit is that the reason why they're not getting back to you is because they just don't know. They don't know what to do with you. I was very, very good, and I think BCG is very, very good at rejecting people or moving them forward. And so eventually you'd get a rejection or you'd move them forward. There are some firms, I was talking to my friend at Bain, and she's like, Bruce, recruiters are just terrible at getting back to people. So Bain doesn't necessarily have that same reputation. So we don't know if Accenture has that kind of reputation as well, whether or not they're the type of person to refer, give you a final, this is what's happening with you, or if they're the types that just leave you hanging forever. Now, what doesn't hurt is if time has passed, it's always okay to follow up. I wouldn't do it on a daily manner, but I would say, like, if it's been 3 hours, that's fine. If it's been a couple of days or a day later, I would say, hey, just want to make sure you got this. I don't think that's bad. I don't think it's annoying. So I would say do that, follow up with them. It also shows your interest. I'm not just one of the people I'm just applying and then that's it, and I'm hoping that for the best. No, I'm truly interested in this. So following up is not a bad thing to do. The same thing I would do for White Shield. I would also follow up and say, hey, just following up with my application, just wanted to see if there's anything else additional that you need from me. This could result in a couple of things. Either they continue to ignore you, which I believe means that they're not sure what's happening with the applications or with the process. They may be waiting for someone to give them the okay to start interviewing again, or you'll get a rejection. But at least you'll know that you have a rejection, so you can move on to other things. So do not feel bad about following up with recruiters. I just wouldn't follow up with them constantly, but I would follow up with them at an okay pace, which is, I think if they've sent you something 3 hours ago and they didn't reply, I think following up with them the following day is perfectly fine. In 3 months, definitely you can follow up with a recruiter at White Shield? Okay, so 8 years of consulting experience in the UN, medical degree, MBA, PHP, and other PHP in progress besides other professional certifications. So it would seem as though you're a very qualified person. Maybe your resume isn't popping for them. Maybe it isn't something, but obviously they had an interest in you if they went as far as reaching out to you. So you could always ask for feedback on your resume. I don't really like asking for feedback. Feedback from recruiters is fine. Feedback from consultants, because like I said, they always have to say something. Even if it's perfect, they'll say something. So I'm not really sure why they worked at a good place. You have a medical degree, MBA. I mean, I don't know what more people could be asking for. So this is probably why they had an interest, but for some reason at certain points, something's falling apart. How do we differentiate ourselves if we get an MBA from finance in a non-target school in the U.S., mostly in Chicago office? How can we differentiate from other candidates? Okay, so there's always a lot of people out there who are just going to be applying. They're going to be applying, and they're going to just be like, okay, I hope this works. I really hope this works. Two things that you can do. One is, of course, referrals. I mean, you don't necessarily need a referral, but you reaching out to people, understanding what the firm is about, showing interest. The last thing you want is the first time they see your name on a resume is to be the first time they've ever heard your name before. Instead, you want it to be like, oh, wait a second, this name sounds really familiar. Oh yeah, this is the guy that reached out and asked all those good questions. So not necessarily referral from me, but at least I know they're interested. Important that they're interested because they probably know what's coming next. They're probably studying for their case interviews. They're very familiar with the process, as opposed to we would receive a lot of people that would just apply. Really, really smart. And we would interview them, and then it'd be like, you never even knew what a case interview was. You don't know. I know you don't know, because this is bad, right? So you're going to run into that. You're going to run into so making the additional effort is going to make you stand out. When it comes to your resume, we're going to look at impact, and we can't do that all today, but we're going to be looking at impact. We don't want you now. Think about what consultants do. Like, we look at the bigger picture of what consultants do. Consultants come in and they change things. They make a process easier. They make a process better. They make it more efficient. They make it more profit. They reduce costs. They do something like that. You want to show them that you've done that as well, that you've had a lot of impact in the company that you've worked for. So we're talking about, we don't want you to put tasky things on your resume, like, oh, well, I was the person that put the chairs out every time they had a banquet. It's like, all right, I'm glad you kept busy, but that doesn't show me anything. But if you improve the process, or you decrease the setup time by 35%, even though it's a very, very basic job, it does sound as though you're making a process. You're doing something different. You're making the company better. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that every single line that you have on your resume shows impact. We don't want tasky things. We don't want just like answer the phones and greeted people. We want to see something that says increase the number of phone calls by 50% and did this by 30%. So it's always going to be impact on your resume. And so that is one of the ways that you could stand out as well, in a good way. Okay. But you're right, as far as a non-target school, you are already at a disadvantage, because they're used to, they see comfort in University of Chicago. They see comfort in Northwestern. They see comfort there, right? Because they're familiar with this. Like I said, familiarity, they will be comparing you to these schools as well. But they understand that they can't just hire from these schools. There's going to be other schools that they have to hire from. I would advise network. And you don't necessarily, and networking doesn't mean I have to find someone from my school who went to that place. You can be a little bit more creative, and you can find other ways to get contacts at the firm. And if someone really, really likes you, especially if they're a partner, that is pretty much a guaranteed interview for you. Okay, so keep this in mind. I had someone who we never hired anyone from University of Arizona, never, ever. Um, but there's this one person, and she contacted us, and she actually didn't contact me first. She contacted someone who University of Arizona. That's where she went to school, but she contacted someone from USC. And she said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that I'm really interested in becoming a consultant, and I'd be happy to talk to you. Would you be willing to talk to me about consulting stuff? If not, let's talk Pac-10 sports because they're in the same division." They fell for it. They contacted her back. She was very pleasant over the phone. Eventually, she contacted someone who went to Arizona State, but Arizona State for an MBA, which we would never hire either. But he went. He was a military person, so we hired him because he had that military experience. She contacted him. It all led back to me. And so then I had a conversation with her. I found out that she had all the things that she had a great personality. She had all the things that we were looking for as far as test scores. She just didn't have the school. She didn't have the school that we were interested in. But I said, "Hey, call me back in a month, and if you're still interested, I will find a spot to interview you." And she did. We interviewed her. She ended up going into decision round. She got an offer, and I remember specifically at showing people around the office from USC or no UCLA, and UCLA is a decent school, and it's a school that we'd like to get people from. And they were talking to me, and they were all like very much boo-hoo, McKinsey never comes. I mean, first of all, I'm BCG. Why are you telling me about McKinsey? But they're like, McKinsey never comes to our school and never interviews you. Boo-hoo. They're just like so sad about themselves. And I was thinking to myself, you know what? We made an offer from someone from University of Arizona. And I'm scared today because I know today she's interviewing with McKinsey. Now, how is that possible that someone from University of Arizona can get an interview at BCG and McKinsey? Unfortunately, she did not get an offer at McKinsey, and she ended up accepting with us. But you can get these interviews. You just have to put yourself out there because the energy that they're going and they're putting out there they're putting out energy for University of Chicago, Northwestern, but they're not putting any energy out for your school. So that means you have to push the energy out toward them, right? So you have to put more effort in to get your name out there. Okay. Like, Bruce, just stop talking. No, I got 15 minutes. I'm gonna keep talking. Okay. I applied for a business and an analyst at McKinsey Angola office in Africa, and they plan to grow their team there. Do you think the process might be easier or lighter because education there is not so competitive? You might have so office location does matter quite a bit. And so if you go into an office where they're having some problems, as far as like not a lot of people want to work there, or a lot of, not necessarily, hey, do all the HBS and Wharton people immediately want to go to Angola? I don't think so, right? So you would be at an advantage because now you're going to an office that is less, well, I'll just call it less popular. If you're going to offices and you're saying like, I want to go to London, I want to go to New York, and I want to go to Chicago, and I want to go to San Francisco, and I want to go to Boston, it's just like, congratulations, you just picked like 5 of the most popular offices you can think of. And the competition is going to be really fierce. But if you're open to other offices and you say, hey, I want to go to Seattle, in Denver, in Detroit, in Minneapolis, your chances improve because those offices, they have trouble finding people. And sometimes you can look at an office and you can kind of figure out whether or not they're going to have challenges because you look at Seattle, what do they really have next to them? They have, I think it's Washington University or Washington State. That's all they have locally to feed from. LA office where I was from had an advantage because we had, Anderson, which is a pretty good school. We had USC Marshall, and it's like an okay school. We had undergrad, we had Caltech, we had the Claremont colleges, which are really good schools. We had UCLA, USC. So we had a lot to choose from. Denver, what do you have to choose from? Michigan, what do you have to choose from? Maybe University of Michigan, but that's about it. So they need to find other places to get people, right? And so you should have a little bit of an advantage going to an office that is not necessarily the most popular office. And I don't know, maybe it's the most popular office, but that's what I'm thinking. Okay. I was wondering who is actually screening any of the CVs at BCG. Are the consultants from university screening that, or HR? Is there any ban period from the last application. Now, a lot of these firms, now this is why you have to be very, very, very particular about how you apply. If you apply, you have to be ready, because if you get rejected, you can't apply for a whole nother year. And so you could get rejected because you got an interview and then you did poorly in the interview. It's like, sorry, they don't want to see you for another year. Okay, so sometimes it's a whole year before they see you again. If you apply at the wrong time. So one of the things that's going to happen is quite often you have, as experienced hires, I'm going to apply for an application. I have my resume ready and I have this cover letter and I feel really good. I'm going to apply. But is there an open position? Are you sure that there's an open position in that Chicago office? Are you sure? It's like, well, their portal's open. They're letting me go through. It's got to be. No, that's not necessarily true. If you look at Bain right now, it'll show, if you go to them, they'll show you that all 65 offices or 67 offices have openings. Now, what are the chances that they screwed up so much that all 65 offices need to hire someone? It's not likely. But instead, they probably have openings in a few of those offices, but you don't know which ones. And so if you applied in New York and it turns out there's no one there, they're just going to reject you. They're going to make a very informed decision. They're going to pretend like they made an informed decision. They don't like it to look like they don't have any positions open. So they're going to say you don't meet our needs at the time. And then you can apply for a whole year. So if you're just applying randomly, you may be setting yourself up for a lot of rejection in the future because you can't apply again for a whole year. There was one time where I actually interviewed someone 6 months in, but she continued to show interest. We were really desperately looking for someone. She was really close. We broke the rule. We interviewed her 6 months after she interviewed before. She ended up getting an offer, which was very fortunate. But but normally under normal conditions, we wouldn't want to see you again for another 6 months. I mean, I'm sorry, another year. So, now, as far as who's screening the resume at BCG, it's a computer. The computer is now looking at your resume. Back in the day, we would have a sheet of paper with all this stuff, and we would be looking through it, and we would be grading your resume based upon those things that we saw. But nowadays, they have it scanned, and a computer is reading through your resume. Yeah, that's BCG, huh? It's such a personal touch, huh? If you're following up, if you already submitted your application, say McKinsey in Angola, I would say if it's been a week, if they have a deadline, I wouldn't bother them until I knew the deadline is passed. If it's been a week, if you're an experienced hire and it's been a week, I would say it's okay to follow up and say, hey, do you need anything additional for me? Asking if they need additional information is always very safe. You don't want to say like, hey, tell me about how my application's doing, but just say, do you need anything additional for me? And it might it would motivate them. Right? I'm from Malaysia, but it just cut off after I'm from Malaysia. I would say if the sent your email was a week ago, I would say follow up. I mean, we all know what's annoying. We all know it's annoying. If someone is like really getting on us, I was talking to one guy once, and he wanted to become an HR expert. He's just like, HR, recruiting stuff. I don't know why he did, but one of the things I told him immediately was just like, when you're following up with people, you just have to realize that, you don't want to piss people off. At the same time, you want to let them know that you're interested. And I said, the most annoying thing you can do is email them and then follow up with an email the next day. And he says, oh, yeah, that's good advice, Bruce. And I said, yeah, it is good advice because that's exactly what you did to me. You emailed me, and then the next day you emailed me again. You should know better. So I would say if 1 week's passed, it should be fine. I would follow up. Okay, so if you're from Malaysia but you're based in the UK and currently working in finance, now if you want to work in the US, now the only time that we would hire people, most of our hiring took place from schools, and those schools were usually based in the United States. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're U.S. citizens, but those schools were based in the United States. I very rarely, and if ever, saw anyone who came to us who was from another school. I did see it once from INSEAD, but the person was Canadian, and they probably had different visa requirements. So I think that getting a job in the US, if you're not in the US, going to school in the US, is going to be very, very difficult. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but I would say this is something where you have the additional, not only do you have to get the interview, you have to get through the cases, you have to get through all that stuff, but you also have to have the right visa requirements as well. Okay. And I also follow with White Shield as no reply. This is kind of frustrating. It is frustrating. There is now what you could do. Okay, what we're doing it wrong. Okay, so here's something to consider. If we're doing the same thing, and we're not having any results, then why are we doing the same thing? Let's do something different, right? So if you're following up with White Shield and it's just like there's no reply, maybe I'm following up with the wrong person. So maybe you could follow up with someone else. And maybe you could follow up with, like, is the CEO of Whiteside available online? And maybe I'll email them. And I'm not going to say, hey, I submitted my application and I'm like waiting patiently. But maybe you just say, submit your, email them directly and say, hey, you know what? I recently applied your place and I'm really interested in becoming a consultant at your firm. And I was wondering if you had some time to speak with me. I think a couple of things can happen there. Well, three things. Right? They may ignore you, or they may say like, "Hey, great, let's have a conversation," which is fantastic. Now I'm having a conversation with the CEO of White Shield. Or they can say, "Yeah, I'm not really that. Thanks for being interested. I don't really have time, but here's the person who can help you out," and they'll forward you to the recruiting team. Now, if they forward you to the recruiting team, how do you think the recruiting team is going to behave? Now you're getting forwarded an email from the CEO, and the CEO has your name attached, has your resume attached to it. So they may kind of like that may motivate them to actually get in response to you. I have seen that work several times where you just contact the person in charge. They won't want to talk to you, but they will forward you to the right person. And all of a sudden, I would get this quite often. All of a sudden, I would feel this anxiety like, oh, I really have to pay attention to this person, because the last thing I need is the CEO to contact me again and say, hey, how's that application go? So you could try doing something like that as well. Yeah, you go get them. You go get them. That one. Lazy recruiters, this piss me off. Okay. Okay. Spoke with a senior partner briefly on LinkedIn. He was like, good luck with your application, etc. But I don't know how to reach back to him and maybe get a referral or something. Okay, try this. What you want to do is you want to create like a mentor-mentee relationship. Now, they gave you advice. This person, a senior partner, gave you advice. And I hope they give you advice, because if you got a conversation and you spoke, they would have given you advice. And what you want to do is you want to follow up with them and say, hey, look, I followed your advice and it worked out great. So you're creating this mentor-mentee relationship. You tell me stuff and I do it, and I can follow up with you because I can say, hey, look, I followed your advice and I did great. At a certain point, you can ask this question, and I think this is brilliant. One of the people I'm helping as a candidate, client, I am helping, and he came up with this, and I'm like, dude, you're a freaking genius. But at a certain point, he said, because he knows that this person's very helpful and very responsive, he said, hey, and he said this to a senior partner as well. He said, I understand that referrals are really important at BCG. How would you go about getting a referral? So without asking for a referral, he's just asking for advice on how to get a referral. Now, I think there's three responses to this. One is going to be like, referrals aren't that important. Lie. He doesn't want to help you, right? Or they could say, well, here's legitimate advice on how you should go about getting a referral. This is great. Now you're getting legitimate advice from a senior partner. Or they can say, hey, you know what? I'll be your referral. And that's what happened to him. He said, hey, I'll be your referral. And because he was able to open up the conversation without asking for a referral, but bringing up the topic of referrals. And he had demonstrated during that conversation before that he was intelligent and that he was smart, and he showed his resume. He was just like, I can probably do well if you give me a chance to interview. And it worked out really well for him as far as getting. So I would say always, if you ever have an opportunity and if someone is giving you advice, you can always ask that question. You're not asking, hey, can you give me a referral? You're just going to say, I understand they're important. How would you go about getting one? And that could open up a conversation, and that could even lead to them saying like, yeah, wait a second, I'll be your referral. Okay, so I would give that a shot. Emailing people directly is always the best bet. LinkedIn, I would say email people directly, and it's really easy to find people's emails. Just go to like at BCG. It was last name first name at bcg.com. Now you have the email address for everyone who works at BCG, except for maybe like John Smith, because there's probably like 5 of those. Because there's John Smith 1, John Smith 2. But for the most part, that's the email you should use. How are computers actually screening for the CV for BCG? Is it the specific keywords or just the school name, current job? They are giving you points for school name. This is the stuff that you have no control over. Like, this is the school I went to. There's nothing I can do about it. This is my GPA. There's nothing I can do about it. This is my job. This is where I work. There's nothing I can do about it. But it's also looking for impact. I was shocked to find that the best resume that I ever saw that came back, because they're just grading on 0 to 100, was a resume that had it didn't have any of those names in it. It had some pretty basic stuff in it, but a lot of it, there were a lot of numbers. There were a lot of like impact, increased profits 50%, increase this, increase that. And so what it's really doing is, I think it's smart enough to see impact, right? What kind of impact did you have? They may be like misaligned in their thinking, because I think it is counting things twice, because it is counting your GPA, is counting your school. And then when they download the spreadsheet, they sort by those things. So they're double counting. But those are the things that they're looking for. They are, of course, looking at schools, they're looking at jobs, but you could be just as impactful working at a coffee shop as you can working at like Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan. If your job there, if your bullet points say, hey, you know what, I rolled around in the money at the end of the day, it's like, well, that doesn't really tell me anything about you. But if you were working at a coffee shop and you increased profits by 33% by designing a new system, the blah, 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 that's a lot more impactful. Okay. And that will probably score a lot better than just the other bullet points, the really flat bullet points, the non-impact bullet points. Okay. Who or how is the Solve It assessment evaluated? I made it last week and still waiting for a response. I want to know if it's a computer that will decide or a real person to check. Chances are with assessments, they're usually, assessments are usually going to be evaluated by a computer. Unless it's going to be an assessment that is actually I recorded something, but even that nowadays they're assessed by a computer. So it should be something that's fairly quick. If it's taken a long time to do it, I would say, if anything, they're probably, because they're involved with the process. Now, the process can be very complicated, because you're talking about there's going to be a bunch of people. Okay, it wasn't just me. It wasn't just the LA office, but it's every office in North America, and it's every school in North America. Then it's every, so we're coordinating. We're doing a lot of coordination, right? So don't think it's as simple as just like looking at, hey, I'm just looking at this one application. Sometimes there's a lot more involved, which may be the reason why it's taking longer than you expect. We're talking about how, what soft skills are required for it to be a consultant at McKinsey? We often know good quant skills are, but apart from that, what kind of soft skills are required? I mean, I would say that the one thing that is very important for all consultants is communication skills. Having that ability to explain yourself. You could have the best idea in the world, but if you can't explain yourself and you can't communicate properly, then that's a problem, right? You're also looking for people that, hey, you know what? I want to work with this person. I want to spend, I don't mind spending 12 hours a day with this person. And when I have to like go to the airport and it's delayed by 6 hours, my flight, I don't mind spending time with this person. So being a good person, or just being like an enthusiastic person with a lot of energy, is not a bad thing either. But communication is probably key in being able to communicate your ideas. A really quick story. There was this guy, a former associate. He came back and spoke with the interns. One of the interns asked him, what was the biggest takeaway from consulting? What was your biggest takeaway from being a consultant? And he said communication skills. I thought he was going to say Excel or PowerPoint, but he said communication skills. And he said what happened was he started a venture capital firm. He was in front of a bunch of really rich people. And he said that he was allowed to see the presentation of other people who wanted money as well. And he said that the person went before him and was talking. And he said, this person's a freaking genius. This person's a freaking genius. And they're going to make them so much money. But this guy's all over the place. And they can't understand a word he's saying. But he's so brilliant. And so then it turns out the next guy went up, who was the former BCGer. And he says, okay, now we're going to talk about how we're going to make you some money. First, we're going to talk about this. Then we're going to talk about this. Then we're going to talk about this. Very organized, very clear, very concise. And he says, and guess who got the money? I did. So communication skills are key. Communication skills, you have to use them constantly as far as when you're talking to people, when you're doing the fit interview, when you're doing like some kind of online assessments, even because some now they might have to actually talk to a video screen. They're also very, very critical when it comes to the case interviews as well. So communication skills are really, really important. When do applications come out for undergrads for consulting? I would say type in my consulting offer .org and deadlines, MBB deadlines, and you will find the applications for undergrads. Okay, great. Survived first rounds with BCG through the ADC recruiting stream, and I'll be attending Bridge to BCG soon. Hey, congratulations with final round interviews soon. At what point does networking stop helping? Networking is really, really important for getting the interview. So I would say networking at this point, you don't need it because now it's going to be all have to do with your final round interviews. So you don't have to continue network. Now, the only thing that networking can do for you now is it can help you it can help you maybe get to know a little bit more about the process. But I would use your networks to do case studies or help you with that stuff, as opposed to, you don't really need them to tell you like, hey, what's it like to work at BCG? You don't need that anymore. What you need now is just to be focusing on your interviews. Well, congratulations. How many online test mark evaluations? How are the online test mark getting evaluated by the CV? Are you guys just looking at a specific cutoff point, and that's good enough? Well, I mean, they're looking at several things. I mean, there's going to be so the Casey test. The Casey test is something where, first of all, Casey was always locked up like a vault. As far as the results go, they're just like, here you go, Bruce, here's the results. And I'm like, well, how did they get there? And they're like, no, here's the results, right? So they won't necessarily tell you how things were or how they got there. But it is something where they're not just looking at your test results. So it's not like, hey, I got into Casey and I'm doing Casey. Let me say that again. Casey is first round interviews. So it doesn't really matter what you did before. So it doesn't have anything to do with your application now. So Casey is first round interviews. So if the London math test if that's taken before when you're applying, then they're still looking at your application as a whole. But Casey, they're looking at first round interview skills. This is your first round, and they may also be doing a fit interview at the same time. Are you guys just looking at a specific cutoff point, and that's good enough? For everything, like I said, they're comparing. There's someone else who's interviewing that day, and if the other person, if you guys are all both great, they may start to dip back into things, and they may start looking more at your application. But I would say it's not like everyone who reached that level, like that 80% mark, is getting an interview. They are very good at if there's so many people that pass the bar, they just continue to raise the bar. That's what they do. So I wouldn't say that it's like everybody is going to get an interview who does well in the interview. I'm a recent grad. Okay, I have to say that I've been reminded that I kind of went over time, but I'm going to try to go through these really quickly. I'm not a recent grad. I got my MBA in 02. Worked at a startup retail and consulting with a small boutique firm. That's great. 18 months got referrals and resume polishing for consulting. Was it timing or fact that I'm almost 50 years old? I don't have my name. So Devin, this has a lot to do with, do you have, were you rejected? Because I don't know if you said that. 8 months ago, I got referrals and resume polishing for consulting. Was it timing or fact that I'm almost 50 years or I don't have their name, brand name, consulting experience? Now, you have to be realistic when you're applying for a position. You have to be, I'm coming in at entry level. I'm 50 years old, but I'm still coming in entry level because the only thing that these firms respect is people with consulting experience, right? So if you have 3 years of consulting experience, 4 years, 5 years, then I can consider you for a project leader role. But otherwise, if you have no consulting experience, you're coming in as entry level, even a 50-year-old. I recently helped someone who was 42 get a job in consulting. And he didn't have any brand name consulting experience. All his stuff was supply chain. He did have a referral. He did have his resume polished for consulting. So if he got rejected, it could be timing. It could be timing. You have to make sure. Now, even your referral may not be aware of what the timing is like. The thing is, this person that I helped, who was 42 years old, they also got into McKinsey, which would, you figure, would be one of the toughest places to get into. But McKinsey was able to overlook the fact that he was 42 years old and gave him a shot. So it may be, if you did get rejected, it could be just that your timing was off. Because, like I said, just because you got a referral and all this other stuff, if there's no open position, they can't make you an offer. So that could be it. Okay, so I attended a webinar and then I got in touch with someone, the speaker, and she is kind of senior on LinkedIn. She promised to get back to me, and she may also not get back to me as well. Sorry for bothering you. Well, I would follow up. There was one moment when I got an email and I looked at it and I was searching for something else in my email box, and it was from someone who sent me an email like 6 months before, and they said, Bruce, can we talk about stuff? And I felt so bad. I ignored this guy and I felt so bad. How many times did he get in touch with me over the course of the 6 months? And I looked and it was just like, seriously? That was the one time? And they gave up? This obviously he wasn't that interested in this. So it does not hurt to show your interest by continuing to get in touch with people. Like I said, at a certain point, you have to be realistic and back off and say, like, okay, I get it. You're not interested. But I've had other people who said it took them 3 weeks before the person finally got in touch with them because they're really, really busy people. And when we're saying really busy people, it's no exaggeration. I had a friend who's just started at McKinsey, and I was on a bullet train in Japan, and I was just like, hey, I'm on the Hello Kitty bullet train. What are you doing? And she's like, oh, Bruce, it's so bad. I was working 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. No, 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. Those were her hours at McKinsey, first week. 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. And then she said, and then they changed it from 7 a.m. to 3 a.m. But now things are better because it's 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. It's like, okay, so now it's better because it's only 14 hours a day. So if these people get back to you, you should feel fortunate. They are very, very busy people, very, very busy people. So it is going to be something where you have to be patient with them. And this is why I think recruiting, networking is really important to get started as soon as possible, because there's a lot of times that you have to exhaust your opportunities as far as getting back to them. And also you want to build your relationships. You don't want to just like go in there and say like, refer me, instead you want to like build a relationship and then eventually mention referrals. So it is something that is very slow process. The whole recruiting process is slow. Just like even if you look at it, they give you an interview, it's slow. And then the decision round's slow, and studying for cases slow, application process, everything's slow with them. But then once you get in there, you're working like crazy. Thank you for advice about the senior partner. I did get a referral from a business analyst, and I don't know how senior partner can help with what kind of things. You don't want to have too many referrals. The senior partner may also look at it and say, like, you already got a referral. Why would you need me? So I would say if you have a business analyst referral, then I know that I think you should be fine. Although it does not hurt to continue talking to them. It does not hurt to have your name floating around there. And they may even ask, hey, is this person interviewing? Can you let me know? And just having your name floated around by a senior partner is not a bad thing. Because when you hear that, then you start thinking like, oh, this person must be important. I probably have to really pay attention. This person, senior partner, probably wants to know about this person afterwards. So I really have to do things right. Okay. So that's it, everyone. Gianna's like, Bruce, I told you to end this. But anyway, you have a bunch of links if you want to look at resources and things like that. I hope you found this helpful. And I look forward to seeing you next week when we talk about more stuff. Okay? So thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Take care. Bye.